Good evening, everyone. Can you take your seats so we can get started here to what I would call the State of the Settlement meeting tonight here. My name is Doug Van Essen. I am Plainfield Township's environmental lawyer. And once we started the lawsuit, I also became Algoma Township's lawyer. We have Cameron Van Weingarten here, the superintendent of Plainfield Township. He's their professional manager. Kevin Green from Algoma Township, he's the supervisor. Kevin Gritters from Prine and Newhoff, who's the consulting engineer who's designed the water system and extensions that we hope to put in place as a result of the settlement. They're all here to help me. But primarily tonight, I'm going to try to answer your questions. I know you have a lot of questions about the nature of the settlement, what it's going to mean for your individual set of circumstances. And our number one goal here tonight is to make sure you leave with your individual questions answered. And I'll certainly stay around after the meeting if for some reason your questions weren't answered in the formal presentation or in the question and answer period. But hopefully that objective will be achieved tonight and you'll leave with a much better understanding of what's going to happen and how it affects your individual parcels. So to efficiently proceed, I'm going to start with a monologue. No jokes, just a description of what the settlement entails and some of the questions we've received already from you and some of the questions we think are logical to be asked given the nature of the settlement. Then the second part of our presentation tonight will involve your input by you providing questions. And you can come up to the microphone here, try to slowly articulate your questions so people can hear, and then we'll try to get you answers. We have a second microphone over here if you're on that side of the auditorium. I would ask that we restrict that public presentation at that time just to questions. We want to make sure those are answered. At the end of the meeting, you'll have an opportunity to comment on the settlement, pro or con, and share some of your concerns so that we may consider those in this 10-day period before there's final approval of the settlement by the two township boards and Judge Neff, the federal judge who's presiding over the case. There will also be an opportunity, I think next, on the 10th, is that next Tuesday? Monday night. And at Rockford High School, I believe. I think they've moved it to the auditorium now. The Attorney General herself is coming from Lansing to do much what I'm doing here tonight, to give a description of the settlement from the state's perspective, and then to answer your questions and receive your feedback. There's also a formal comment period that's been created after the consent decree was filed yesterday by the parties in the lawsuit and published on the state's website. There's also a created opportunity there for anyone to make a public comment about the settlement. So your opportunity, again, to express your concerns if they're not addressed by the settlement will be capable of being presented to the state and the Attorney General, and they'll collect those and sift through those. And again, we'll be presenting this to Judge Neff shortly and asking her for her approval. The consent decree itself, hopefully none of you have tried to print it out on the webpage of the state. If you were to do that, this is what you would get. So hopefully you'd have enough ink toner in your printer. It's that thick. So it can be easily accessed, though. It's in a series of files on the state website. All the appendices are separately listed. There's an index at the front of the consent decree, so you want to open the consent decree first and look at the index. That's your easiest way to see the detail. And we wished we'd had more opportunity to get this out to you in advance of tonight's meeting. It wasn't finalized until about 5 o'clock yesterday. So that's, and you'll see from the heft of this why the detail in this settlement took so long to formally negotiate. Negotiations were still occurring Monday morning. So it is truly hot off the press, both in terms of the nature of the settlement and the verbalization and documentation that's in the consent decree itself. Back in the lobby, we have, for Plainfield Township, a sign-up sheet for our newsletter. I'm sure some of you receive our newsletter. If you're not on that list, be sure to sign up, because details of the unfolding and implementation of the settlement are going to be regularly reported in the newsletter. So you're going to want to make sure that you're getting the latest information, and that's the best way for us to communicate that to you. On Plainfield's website, you will see a link to the state consent decree. So an easier way of navigating to the consent decree itself will be to go to our website, click on that link, and you'll be directed to where on the state's large website this consent decree is located. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the trustees from Algoma and Plainfield Township who are present here tonight. Could you please stand if you're a township trustee from either Algoma or Plainfield? These folks have been working hard on your behalf over the last 2.5 years of this crisis. And particularly those in Plainfield Township deserve your appreciation, because they spent $500,000 on Kevin here in Prine and Newhoff to, in advance of even settlement discussions, designed the municipal water system that would meet most of the affected area and community's needs if it were to be approved. And frankly, this was like a chicken and the egg, because if you didn't have that design developed and the estimates of cost associated pulled, Wolverine would have no idea of knowing how much municipal water would cost, and it wouldn't have the capability of making the important decisions corporately it had to make. So someone had to go forward into the lurch and spend that money, and Plainfield put down most of the reserve of its water system to get that engineered so that we could sit down with the state of Michigan and Wolverine and try to reach this important settlement. I would also like to thank, frankly, the state of Michigan and Wolverine for their roles in achieving this. I have spent 39 years practicing law, mostly in litigation for local units of government like the townships here against the state of Michigan, working on common issues. And it was very encouraging for me to see the state officials that were involved in this crisis, both from the DEQ, now called EGLE, Karen Vorse, Abby Hendershot, to name just two, but there's many who were involved, as well as the AGs that we had assigned to the case. Put your health and safety interests, frankly, ahead of the environment. If I'm critical of the DEQ, it's usually they seem to value trees as much, if not more, than people's interests, particularly when it comes to jobs. But here, their focus was on your welfare. And when we came to the roll up your sleeves, get down to hard negotiations that had to occur, they made compromises. They did not sacrifice the environment materially, but the compromises they made with Wolverine were largely on the environmental side of the equation, not on the water interest side. And so I was very impressed with their priorities and their desire to make sure your interests were attended to. And I think that deserves recognition. Wolverine also deserves credit. The water component alone, you've heard that $69.5 million is dedicated to Plainfield Township and its expenses in extending municipal water. $62 million of that is earmarked for the additional construction that will unfold over the next 4 years to actually install the water lines, both the mains and the service lines and the well plugging that will be involved with the connection of most of the homes to municipal water. $7.5 million is going to our plan improvements on the south side of the river to make sure we have the granulated active carbon filtering on our wells that are used to supply municipal water so we can ensure that it's PFAS free. So that's almost $70 million that they're going to be giving to Plainfield Township for those improvements. In addition to that, just on the water side of this, for those homes that we can't reach practically at this point for water, and maybe 15% of you that are having whole house filters are going to continue to have to use whole house filters in the near future. And they're setting aside the money that is necessary to maintain those filter systems indefinitely. So I think when you total the costs of just the water side of this settlement, it's near, if not in excess of $100 million. So that's a huge commitment by the company on your behalf. And when we talk about some of the reasons why we are settling this case, I will note that there were some uncertainties in the litigation, some uncertainties about proof of contamination and linking it to the company in some areas. There were some uncertainties in terms of the threshold level of what is of concern. And Wolverine went beyond what the law requires right now in order to meet the community interest. So the company deserves credit for that. We are focused today on the water components only of this particular settlement. You can go to the AG's forum if you're concerned tonight about the environmental side, what's going to be done at the tannery site or the House Street site in terms of remediating the geology or hydrogeology. We're focused on water tonight. And I would urge you, if you've got concerns about that half, to go either comment on the state's webpage or go to that particular forum. I think I've addressed all the preliminary concerns that I wanted to share with you. One theme you'll hear from me tonight is that litigation, and if any of you have been involved in litigation before, you'll know this, but litigation involves hurry up, wait, consideration or compromise, hurry up, and wait. And so we've been waiting for this day, for those of us who've been actively involved in this, for 2.5 years. And for a long period of time, we had very little to report to you. And then we have this flurry of activity that's occurred really since Thanksgiving, when we had our preliminary draft settlement and concept, till yesterday, literally yesterday, when the document was finalized. So it was hurry up after waiting for 2.5 years. And unfortunately, that has led to kind of a compressed approval period. And part of the reason that's compressed is your interest and our interest in taking advantage of the construction season in 2020. If you know anything about excavators and what they're doing right now, they're thinking about their project season. So in Michigan, we have 2 seasons, right? We have construction and we've got winter. And they're planning right now for their summer jobs. If we don't get this settlement finalized within the next 10 days, and we're scheduled to do that now, but if we can't get a finalization and the financial commitment for Wolverine, we can't put out our request for proposals and line up the contractors that we need to start the heavy lifting of getting these water lines installed, the 20 miles or so of water mains that will be installed as part of the settlement. So that was our hard backdrop. And so we knew we had February 15. We couldn't go beyond that. And it literally took until yesterday to get the settlement finalized. So if any of you are wondering why, there's this 1 week period, basically, in which this is being publicly shared and publicly disclosed and talked about before there's approval. It was not that we're trying to rush this thing past you. It was simply that we have that construction season we want to meet, and it took that while to negotiate that very extensive document. Maybe we can show, Robert, the water maps. You will see in this map, in the red and lighter pink or lighter red areas, where municipal water is going to be delivered over the next 4 years. There is also a list in the consent decree. This map is in the consent decree. I think this is map G, Appendix G will have this map in it. There's also a list in Appendix I in the consent decree of all of the parcels and addresses that will be receiving municipal water as a result of this settlement. So if you haven't checked on that parcel list, we distributed that parcel list when we had an agreement in principle back in about Thanksgiving and early December. So many of you are aware if your parcel is going to be scheduled for water delivery or not. But if you're uncertain about that, check Exhibit I in the consent decree. Now, one of the concessions that Wolverine gave is that they've reduced the threshold of concern from 70 parts per trillion. If you recall, when this controversy started, I think it was 300 parts per trillion that the EPA kind of used as a point of reference. We've reduced it to 70 as a state, and now in this settlement, 10 is the action level. And what that means is in the affected area, which is a broader area that includes the blue and the red, if your home is less or is 10 or more and you're not presently getting municipal water, you're going to get filtered water. And again, that was a concession that Wolverine made. That level of 10 is what we're going to be using until such time as the state goes lower. We don't know that it'll ever go lower than 70, but we expect it will go lower. We doubt that it'll go lower than 10, but we have provisions in the consent decree that if it goes lower, then we'll have a lower action level. Now, within the red areas, all homes are going to be connected. Whether or not you've tested for PFAS at any level, you're going to receive connection. And that means that you're getting not only the service lines extended without any cost to you, you're going to get the connection fees that are paid to hook your house up to the system. Typically, you spend a connection fee to pay for the existing system's infrastructure. That is going to be paid. The service lines, which are typically the homeowner's responsibility, will be covered. The plumbing in your homes that is necessary will be covered, as well as the plugging of your wells. Now, a question we've received before, and I'm sure we're going to get it again tonight, is why should my property be connected in the water area if currently it's not 10 or above? There's a couple reasons for that. First of all, we need a volume of water necessary to make the system work efficiently. There's a reason you don't have municipal water yet. And that reason is because there are not enough homes that would ordinarily justify the economic cost of extending these lines and the connection fees. As your community develops, you're going most likely, at some point or another, you would have municipal lines being extended into your area. I'm 63 years old. I've lived in the Grand Rapids area all my life. I've lived for 10 years on Bella Vista, where we had our own community system. Other than that, I've lived in Walker and Wyoming and Grand Rapids. I've always had to live with municipal water. The people in Grand Rapids in an urban area don't have the option of well water versus municipal water. You're obligated to use the system. Now, many of you are going to say, well, I moved out to the rural areas so that I could have well water and not pay, that water fee. And I get that. And I understand that. But we now have this crisis. We've got to move to take care of your neighbors. And you also need a safe buffer zone. And so the areas that you see in red and light red are the scientists' determination of both where the plumes are right now after 2.5 years of identification, and also a safe buffer area on either side. Because although your home may be free of PFAS right now, the fact of the matter is plumes move vertically and they move laterally. It may be your well is set above or below the pollution that actually exists under your property, or it may be that in the future the plume will move in your way. And the reality is the state cannot be testing constantly. Wolverine can't be affording the testing that would be necessary to make sure that when that moment where PFAS hits your house, they've identified it. So we need to have a safe buffer zone, and this is typical anytime you have a pollution problem. The last thing that I would say to you who have no PFAS right now but are going to be forced to connect is that this takes away a cloud of uncertainty that is hanging over your property value right now. I'm not a real estate lawyer, but I know that there would be potential problems, and some of you have experienced this. Even though your house is free right now, you're under the stigma of this whole problem, and realtors are nervous about what this means if you got your house up for sale and what you have to tell prospective buyers. Because the reality here is that we are settling not just now, but we are settling for a 30, 40, 50-year period. We are not only providing water to you who are affected now, but we are providing water to an area for residents of future years who may be coming into our community that know nothing about this PFAS crisis. And the beautiful thing for you is you're going to avoid liability if you were not connected and suddenly they tested 10 years from now and found out you did have PFAS after they bought their house. That would be my luck. I would buy a house and then find out it was the water was PFAS, and then you have lawsuits. That's how lawyers, are full employment for lawyers is situations like that. So by creating this buffer and finding out where the plume is and creating this zone around it, we are basically enabling our community to remove this stigma. And in terms of selling your house, if you're not part of this area that's identified here in the red zones or in the filter areas that we'll show you later on, you should be comfortable in presenting your house for sale without having to give a disclaimer. If you're not, feel you want to show this consent decree and the maps, at least you'll have something tangible to show to your buyers that indeed you're outside the PFAS area of concern. One of the things Wolverine said in their negotiations to us is we're basically providing Plainfield and Algoma townships 30 years of municipal expansion at our dime. And the reality is that's what they're doing, but their PFAS has forced us to go 30 years ahead of schedule. And your concession, your contribution as a community, as individuals, is you're going to have to pay municipal water in those regular rates a little ahead of what you otherwise would have done. Hopefully your property's worth a lot more money, or at least more money than it would have been, because of the security of lifting this cloud and providing municipal water, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with. Now, there are those of you who say, I like well water and not municipal water. I like the taste of my well water better. The reality is Plainfield and the municipal water you're going to get is well water too. It's coming from wells on the south side of the river where our plant is located. So you're getting well water, and frankly, it's going to have the same granulated active carbon, which absorbs the PFAS and other volatile organic compounds that might be there that we don't even know exist. It will grab those and purify our water. So you're going to get PFAS-free water, you're going to get granulated active water through the Plainfield system. Well water, purified the way your water, if you have a whole house filter, is purified. Our water is put through an additional 10 feet of sand and regular carbon for extra filtering. It's monitored 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It is tested more regularly than anyone's well system can possibly be tested. And now that we have the GAC filtering and we're committed to a permanent GAC filtering of our system, frankly, you're going to have the safest water in Michigan. And I say that as a resident of Grand Rapids, and during this lawsuit, I had my water tested. And it came back at 2 parts per trillion in PFAS, because Grand Rapids is drawing the water right from Lake Michigan. It runs it through the same carbon and sand, but not granulated active carbon. So Grand Rapids is testing about 2 parts per trillion because a regular filtering system won't get the PFAS out. And as I said, the great thing about this GAC filtering is it takes out other pollutants that might exist in the well water. And so you're going to get a great product. It is the well water without a lot of even the surface water problems, the mini plastics that surface water systems have in them. You're getting clean well water that's filtered. Let's talk a little bit about the construction schedule. 20 miles of new water mains and all the attendant connections that are going to be required could not be practically accomplished in 1 year. we anticipate a 4-year construction schedule. And Robert, if you could put up the other map that has the multi-coloring. Yes. We hope to start soon in the green areas that you see on this map. House Street and Wellington Ridge have been prioritized by Eagle and through communications with Prine and Newhoff. We've designed those areas first. They are ready to go in terms of the bid packages for the contractors, and we hope to put those out soon so that we can extend water into those areas that are identified here in green. You'll see smaller parcels if you look closely at the map. There are parcels that have not been subject to what I would call a typical urban ordinance before. There are a lot of houses where water was provided where people weren't forced to hook up. So they're being hooked up now because they're in an active PFAS zone. And so some of those smaller parcels only require the service lines. That activity, again, we hope to pick up relatively soon here in 2020. We're then going to move to the areas that you see in brown or amber there in next year, then the area in blue, in a heavy blue there, and finally the yellow area will be 2023. What happens in the areas that we can't reach? I mentioned that 15% or so of the homes we could not reach because of expense or because of just practically the stagnant water that would exist if we ran an extended line for a few homes. Those are filter areas. If we can go back, Robert, to the other map. The first map. I don't know, Kevin, do we have a filter map? There's another map. I'm sorry, Robert. The heavy purple one. Thank you very much. Thanks to, by the way, Frontline for hosting this forum tonight. This is a perfect facility for something like this. Frankly, we thought we'd have more people here. But in any event, thank you to Robert and the staff at Frontline for helping us with the technology of getting this together. But you will see here the purple areas. And those purple areas we can't reach in the near future with municipal water. Now, someday as the area develops, if it continues to develop, those areas might be served by municipal water. Up in the northern area here above the city of Rockford, that section can't effectively be served by Plainfield system because of height. Rockford is working on additional capacity for its well system that's free of PFAS. There's a possibility in the future that that area will be served by the city of Rockford system. But for now, you're going to be in the filter zone. And those areas in the filter zone will continue, according to the consent decree, to have their filters maintained indefinitely by Wolverine. So the testing that will occur, the maintenance fees that will be incurred, all will be covered by Wolverine as part of this settlement. They're also going to have to set aside the financial assurances to make sure that those costs are paid even in the event that Wolverine should go out of business. So that was a part of the extensive negotiations that the state had with Wolverine. They'll be setting aside a trust fund to make sure in those filter areas that you're covered indefinitely. If in those zones you happen to be PFAS free now, but in the future, 10 years from now, your house hits that 10 parts per trillion threshold, you'll be given either point of use filters or whole house filters at Wolverine's expense, and then you'll be part of the trust fund that will exist to continue that indefinitely. What happens if you're outside the black areas and your property ends up being subject to PFAS down the road? There's an opener in the consent decree where Wolverine and Eagle, working with the townships, will have to decide what the appropriate water remedy is in those areas. So Wolverine is not getting a complete release like you typically get in a settlement. So they're paying $100 million. They're paying even more money for the remediation at Tannery and the House Street areas. And they're also exposed to those areas beyond black if PFAS develops. So there is an opener. There's not a complete release that's been given to them for all PFAS-related problems. Let's see here. Now, if you're in that lighter pink area in the water area, that means you're an undeveloped parcel. So I don't know if anyone's here tonight. They don't have a home yet in the municipal water area, but they have a parcel that is subject to that, those restrictions. What happens if that gets developed? If it gets developed, it will have to hook up to municipal water. But that's typical in any urban setting where municipal water is available. The new developer will be required to hook up to the system. Wolverine is not paying for that. They're paying for their exposure to date, but if in the future the developer has to hook up, the developer will be expected, as in every other municipality, to bear the cost of that hookup. Let's see, what else did I want to cover here? Until you're actually hooked up. So if you're in one of the construction zones that is scheduled for subsequent years, or even in the 2020 area, until you're actually hooked up, you're going to be subject to the status quo. Wolverine will continue to provide the maintenance and the testing of the whole house filters to make sure that they're working. There are a few houses that are outside the affected area right now that were earlier on the municipal water parcel list. And there's only about 20 homes or so that are in that category. You're going to be given the opportunity for the free hookup with the connection fees. You will not be forced to do that, but if you don't get the hookup now, if later on a problem develops and you're outside the area, you're going to be in that exception where Eagle, Wolverine, and the townships will be involved, but you may not get an automatic result like you have now. It's possible Wolverine, if those situations develop, will disclaim any responsibility or liability, and you won't have the free hookup. So if you're on that list, if we're part of the original parcel list, but you're not on there now, you will be given that one-time opportunity, and you may want to seriously consider taking advantage of it. That brings me to really the final area that I wanted to cover before we open it up to questions. And that is, why settle the case at all? Why not push for a complete resolution that would perhaps require Wolverine to provide more municipal water or pay for your water bills indefinitely? Anytime there's a litigation, there's going to be some compromise. And for us to settle now avoids at least 4 or 5 years of additional litigation, which delays a permanent resolution. A lot of you are concerned about your ability to sell your house, you don't like living under this cloud as to what's going to happen if you have whole house filters, to bring certainty sooner rather than later is a major reason, maybe the most important reason for us to litigate. There also are always uncertainties when you get into litigation. And one of the great uncertainties, unfortunately for us in Algoma Township, was we didn't have the clear roadmap from Wolverine's tannery to a particular site with clear evidence that they deposited in that site that's producing the Algoma contamination. Now, we believe we could have proved that eventually. We could have found the 85-year-old truck drivers that took it from the plant, put it out in the old gravel pit that we believe existed behind Myers there, but we didn't have those proofs yet. Even if we had established that, Judge Neff let it be known that she wasn't certain that she could force municipal water on Wolverine as opposed to whole house filters. So you might be living under that system had we gone to the mat and gone all the way through trial. As I mentioned earlier, right now, the threshold is 70 parts per trillion. It's possible that if we litigated all the way through, the judge would say, Wolverine, you're not obligated until you have a house that's below the state regulation level, which right now is 70 parts per trillion. We got a better threshold at 10 parts per trillion through the settlement. So there were sound reasons for us to do this. We think the settlement is large enough for us to pay for the costs of the water extensions, and we got a good kickstart on our plant costs in the future through this particular settlement. There'll be more litigation against waste management for some of the south side problems our plant's experiencing, but we got at least a third of those costs already paid by this resolution. So it's a great start there. We are making a commitment to provide this municipal water, even if the cost is greater than $62 million. Now, we trust our estimates. We have the connection fees built into there that aren't hard costs, and they're traditional costs. They're not as hard costs, so there's some flexibility that we have in the construction schedules, but it's entirely possible that when this unfolds, given the nature of construction right now and the full employment we're in and the construction activity in West Michigan, that it may cost us more. We're committed to providing this to you. And if Plainfield has to go above that, the system will have to bear the costs at some level. But those are the general questions that I know have emerged from the settlement. You now have the basic details of the settlement. There will be ordinances that will be adopted that are Exhibit J in the consent decree if you want to look at the ordinances. There will be provisions in there, those ordinances for the geothermal systems that people have, their heating systems that use this water. There will be a permitting process that you'll have to go through to continue to use those systems. And Eagle is committed to making recommendations. We'll have to see how that will all unfold as the settlement unfolds. But there is a process for you to make your pitch as to why your continued use of those systems and discharge potentially of those waters, whether it's if it's an open loop system, there is a process that you can use to get that permitting in place. So, I've droned on for a long time. Now it's your opportunity to ask questions of me, perhaps of the elected officials or the township officials that are here, or Kevin Gritters, our chief engineer on the project. Feel free to come up to either one of these microphones and ask your questions, and we'll try to get them answered. Again, at this point, I'd like you to hold your comments until we at least give people an opportunity to get their questions out and get those answered. we will have that comment period, guarantee. Okay? Sir, come on. Thank you.
Is there any consideration for the Boulder Creek area? I know we've had a lot of stuff over there, and we are very much not on this map. So I wanted to know, is that a part of this, or is that a separate litigation that's continuing?
It's a great question. And if you didn't hear it, it's Boulder Creek. Why is that not part of the study area? And why is it not part of the settlement? And both of those things are true. Boulder Creek has not been effectively studied like the North Kent study area was. So we don't have a complete knowledge of the hydrogeology of that area. And right now, there is no litigation between Eagle, formerly DEQ, and Wolverine, and the townships and Wolverine. There are other responsible parties, frankly, that were involved in the Boulder Creek waste deposit there. There are some foundries that deposited, so there's broader defendant base over there. That's been excluded for the consent decree. So the bad news is I don't have any resolution for you folks yet. Now, most of the area is served by municipal water, so it may not be quite as critical in terms of the health and safety of the water issue. But that's an open issue, and Wolverine has not been released, nor is there any covenant not to sue Wolverine regarding the areas outside of the North Kent study area. So we'll just have to wait to see what the future evolves in that area. Good question, though.
John Rath, 2001 Meek Drive.
Familiar face.
I have three questions.
Sure.
For those that are in the areas that are having service added, just mandatory is hookup, there is no opt-out. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Next question. Some of those areas, I know service is being routed down private drives. Is the tear-up of the private roads, will that also be covered by the settlement?
Yeah, we'll need easements if we don't have it already. Some of you have been already approached about an easement. The roads will be repaired as part of this process.
And the last question is, what about tear up on individual owners' properties like sidewalks and driveways and things like that require for the laterals to be hooked in?
The effort here is this would be a normal municipal project, and a restoration of any lawns damaged is going to be part of that process. We're trying to provide a turnkey operation so that you don't have any costs associated with this project. That is the goal.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. I forgot to talk about irrigation, because some people have asked if they can continue to use their wells for irrigation. So you're being forced to hook up for potable water. People get that, but can they continue to use their well for irrigation? There is a process where you can, again, ask for a permit for that. I suspect, to be realistic, that in most instances, if you're just a residential property, that's not going to be allowed. But there's a possibility, if you have a whole house filter, I don't know, we were talking about this beforehand, can you continue to use the whole house filter on your sprinkling side? You know, the DEQ is obviously concerned that if water is going to be used for irrigation, does it end up being used by your 5-year-old who picks up the hose and drinks it? Is it going to be putting PFAS onto your lawns? So, you know, those are logical and important concerns that will have to be taken up on a case-by-case basis. But it's possible, I suppose, if you have a whole house filter and you can continue to use it for that irrigation, that you might make the pitch that you're not risking your grandchildren's safety or children's safety on drinking on the hose or putting the PFAS contamination on your lawn. You can make that argument. We'll see where it gets. we can't solve everything tonight, and we can't solve anything in, this document's already thick enough, but there's a process that's been identified for how we resolve those questions in the future. So more questions, please. Thank you.
Marilyn Anderson, and we're at 3599 Warwick Glen. Okay, we've been getting bottled water because our water has PFAS in it. Okay, it had tested low to begin with, and then we had it, the state came in and tested it. It tested, Bill Farrell called, it was about 900 parts per trillion. He called in a panic, and he said, don't drink it, which we have not been. And they retested it, now they're saying it's lower. But we are in the cloud. We're like 500 feet from the river, and we talked to environmental people, and they said, because our well is 55 feet down, and we're on a hill, our well is hitting river bottom. Now, the river is totally polluted, and we are not on the address to have our water connected. We do have water going to the development behind us, but they state they will not connect our water. And since we are not on the address, are we not ever going to get it connected, or are we 5 years out, and is Wolverine eliminated from it? And are we going to just be in the cloud?
Well, I don't know. So you've checked the parcel list, and you're not
We
on
are
there.
not on it.
So you're not in the municipal water section.
No.
Are you in the filter area?
Well, one person said they had a filter, and they said, we don't have filter because we didn't complain enough. Well, we do have the big bottled water coming all the time, but we do have a fire hydrant on our back corner of our corner. But we can pay $15,000, and we can hook it up and go about our business. We will not sell our house when we cannot drink our water.
Right.
So where do we stand? We're just out of luck?
If you're in the filter area,
We're not in a filter area.
you're not in the filter area or the municipal water area.
I don't think so, no. No, because nobody's got the big filters.
Okay. We'll have to check your individual address.
Well, we've been asking and asking, and we get the runaround.
Well, one of the reasons we're here tonight is to make sure that you don't get the runaround.
Yeah, we're
indefinite.
tired of the runaround.
Yeah, I get that, and we'll make sure that we figure out where you are exactly on the map and what the situation is with your home.
Yeah, because sometimes it's low, and it had been low, but then if it hit high one time, it's going to hit again. I mean, and this is what we were told by environmental
Sure. Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Your question is so specific that
And we
we'll
want
have.
an answer.
Yeah, I get
You know,
it.
everybody else is getting water, and even if they don't have PFAS, and I agree with, they need to
Right.
hook up. When they go from plan all the way up, they do.
So why don't you
need to.
stay around, and we will get your address. I have your name,
Okay.
Marilyn, and we'll get your address, and we will figure out what the situation is with your property.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions that people have?
Hi, Matt Hayes. You talked about an opener for, I'm assuming you're doing groundwater modeling to figure out where the plumes are, and maybe a house isn't contaminated now, or the water isn't contaminated, but 10 years from now, it becomes contaminated. When is the opener that you referred to for the consent decree to be reopened and renegotiated for the areas?
Well, by opener, I really meant that there's no release of Wolverine or covenant not to sue Wolverine regarding any properties that are not in the affected area. So it would be immediate. So if PFAS shows up in your well water, then immediately you should bring that to the attention of Eagle and the township, and frankly, Wolverine, because this is designed to address the known contamination right now in the North Kent study area. It's not meant to resolve all the potential properties outside the area that might subsequently become affected. I would say this, that hopefully you'll be able shortly with those resources, now that we have models for how we're handling the situation, to come up with a remedy for you if that develops.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I have two other questions. I
Sure.
don't mean to be a mic, hog
No,
here,
because
but,
your questions are likely to be someone else's, so that's what we're here.
for people who are not in the municipal hookup zone, who may wish to drill a new well on their property, is there any guidance coming about drilling new wells?
If you're not in the affected area, and we have those, Robert, there was some of the subsequent maps. Are you in Plainfield Township or Algoma?
It's Plainfield.
Yeah. So this is the Algoma map. It contains most of the areas in Plainfield. There's a little area closer to the Grand River. But if you're in that map, which is an exhibit in the consent decree, you're in the area of regulation, okay? If you're outside of that, you should be able to drill like anyone else, or like historically you've been able to drill. If you're in the water area, you're unlikely to get a well permit from Kent County. If you're in the filter area, in the affected area, you're going to be able to drill, and depending on what the result of the test is of the water, you may or may not get a whole house filter. So if in your filter area, you want to put a new well in, you'll drill down, it'll be tested. If you have a whole house filter, you're probably going to continue to use whole house filter. But if you're not, it'll be tested. And then if it comes above 10, you're going to get a whole house filter. But outside of this area, it's pretty much business as normal. And I don't mean normal over the last 2.5 years. I mean normal before the crisis.
Okay. All right, thank you. And last question, I don't know if anyone has done some cost modeling on the, running a GAC system, et cetera, disposing of the waste, et cetera, gets expensive. I'm a little concerned about what the cost of the utility bill is going to be. Is there any discussion about what the water bill is going to be to people who are in the hookup zone on a monthly basis?
Well, once you're hooked up, you're going to get the same bill that everyone in the system right now, the 36,000 people that are in the system already get. You're not going to be treated adversely. You're in the common pool. And one of the reasons why this is a good settlement is we do have some south of the river concerns. We have some PFAS in our wells, so we're getting the cost through both the 7.5, right now we have, through a state grant, we obtained the GAC filtering, and we're getting $7.5 million more towards our future GAC filtering. We're getting, as part of the settlement, you'll see in their language that Eagle, Wolverine, are going to support the township's request for an additional $5 million grant towards our permanent capital improvement for the permanent filtering. And then we hope to get the rest from waste management. So what I'm telling you, as a long answer to your question, is we hope that most of the costs of that additional filtering will be borne through either the state grants or the PRPs who have caused this problem on the south side, Wolverine and Waste Management. And that will keep our costs relatively low. So PFAS is not a major cost of the system. The additional benefit for those of you who know about our system will be that the GAC is taking everything out. Any volatile organic chemical will be removed. So that's why I say you're going to have the safest water in Michigan because of this purification system that will be ongoing. There should not be a burden to the system by the extension because we're of the 70 million plus in this financial package in our game plan. Does that make sense?
Somewhat. Who are the designers of the, is it Prine
Prine Newhoff.
Okay, can I speak with you after? Are you, okay, I'll talk to them offline.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Kevin Bellumer. I'm kind of curious about the monitoring that will be taking place. Generally speaking, the plumes will move. We're in an area that's no detect or below that 10 parts per trillion threshold. Who's responsible for monitoring? Will it be on a request-by-request basis, periodic? Any idea?
Sure, it's a good question. So one of the advantages of the hurry up and wait nature of litigation has been this has taken 2.5 years. And why is that an advantage? Because we know a lot more about the plumes 2.5 years into this crisis than we did when our first offer to Wolverine was $20 million to extend water, okay? I think the Eagle believes it has a pretty good handle on where the plumes are and where they're headed. One of the advantages that we have is the Rogue River kind of circles the study area. You know, it starts north and then it drops south, and then the Grand River is your east-west southern barrier. And Kevin is more versed in hydrogeology than I, but you know, I stayed at Holiday Inn and I had to learn a little bit about hydrogeology, and I know that rivers express the aquifer. So your rivers are really the aquifer coming up and then coming to the surface and draining out. So they're thought to be largely a barrier to contaminated plumes. And that's bad news for Lake Michigan, which receives all of this eventually. It's good news for us in the sense that we know where the plumes are likely to go into the Rogue. There's a reason why on the other side of the Rogue we're not seeing, you know, a north in Algoma contamination, because the Rogue is carrying it down and out. And part of the environmental side of this settlement is that Wolverine will be expected to monitor the environment over time. And there's a monitoring plan. You'll see that as one of the exhibits here in the consent decree that they'll have to undertake so that the plume is marked in the future and we're studying it as we go. And then, as the gentleman indicated, if for some reason it pops up in areas we don't expect, then we'll have to take that up with Wolverine. Mm-hmm.
A question on this side.
Sure.
Yeah. My question is probably just specific to my property, but I'm at 7626 Jericho, and our house is listed on the municipal water list.
Okay.
So a year and a half ago, when the folks came up our driveway and said, here's some water, we've been getting water ever since in bottled form.
Yeah.
When I look at Exhibit I, we're listed as being in the occupied parcels that are in the purple for a filter map. So I'm just trying to figure out, so on the purple map, we're listed as the occupied parcel in the filter area, but on the municipal list, our address is listed as municipal water hookup.
So you're getting municipal water. You may have ended up in the purple zone.
Okay.
But because municipal water will be coming past you,
Okay.
we're going to hook you up.
Okay.
So you'll be
what's
getting the free hookup.
And what's the discriminant, how does one know if you're supposed to have filters now or just get water now? What's the criteria? I mean, I'm just wondering.
I don't know what Wolverine and Eagle, frankly, decided, why some people got the whole house filter, some got water.
Okay.
And maybe they weren't certain that you were going to continue to have a problem, and so didn't justify the expense.
Okay.
So I suspect it will be status quo until we hook you up. I don't know where in the construction schedule you are, but you'll probably continue to get through water until we actually hook you up.
Okay.
With the service.
Is there a way to tell them by our address, because the maps are hard to look at with the construction zone? Can we determine our hookup?
If you're on I, are you in parcel I?
I believe we are, yeah.
Okay, then you're getting municipal water. And then we can check to see where, where you're scheduled in the implementation phase. I don't know where you live, but
Okay.
these maps generally show, and they're estimates. We
Right.
may find that things go fast. I doubt that the first year they'll go faster
Right.
than what we have projected. So some of the green may flow into the amber. And vice versa, as we get going here, we may take more in another year. We've got mechanisms where we can draw funds from Wolverine. One of the things that's important to know is that they're self-funding this. We were going to do a 20-year bond period, payment period, but that got into security. What happens if Wolverine doesn't survive? GM went bankrupt. What happens if that happens with Wolverine? So now we've got a 4-year schedule, and they're going to be putting millions of dollars, just transferring it over, depending on the construction season. And if we are moving faster next year, we can draw more money and move faster, and they'll fund that.
And
Sure.
this gal behind me didn't want to ask the question, so I'm going to ask it for her. She just wanted to know the frequency and the average cost of a water bill. Is that what you wanted to know? Yeah. Okay.
How? Yeah, I don't know the answer. Is it, Cameron, how is it a monthly? It's quarterly bill.
And I probably don't have the average on top of my head, probably, I don't want to venture a guess, because it depends on usage.
Yeah, a lot depends on how much sprinkling you do and how much you use. But what is a range, an average range? Ri-
On our FAQs,
Yeah.
number 8 addresses that, and it comes to average single-family home is 63 a quarter.
63 a quarter is your average. A quarter. Okay, so you're looking at, $240 roughly a year for an average home, is what that was Rick Soleil.
That's the cost right now?
That's the cost of an average user of the system. And again, we're not expecting your bills to go up dramatically because this capital cost is being paid for. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Renee Mata. You're talking about 10 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
Could you just clarify, if that's adding certain PFAS together to get the 10? And then with the new draft MCLs, the disconnect between municipal and
Yeah,
water?
I think it is an average 10 parts per trillion. I'll have to look at the consent decree itself. That's a great question.
Is it like half a dozen PFAS?
So there's,
I believe it's a 10-part combination between PFOS and PFOA.
yeah,
The balance of those two together
it's
is
10,
not accounting for any other types of PFAS.
right.
And then
So PFOA and PFOS are the two that are combined together. If that's 10 or more, you're at an action level.
And then as far as the MCLs, that's probably a different discussion, but as far as using those numbers at, once they're approved for,
So if the state goes lower than the 10 parts combined, then that'll be our new threshold. So if you're in the filter areas and it goes down to 8, or if they add additional, right now, I think there's one exhibit and you'll see all the PFAS compounds. There's like 25, 40 different compounds. As we learn more about PFAS, we can expect more regulation. And when that happens, that will adjust the filter threshold in the filter areas. That will adjust, frankly, in the open areas that aren't addressed by the settlement. It may mean more homes will have to be addressed. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm one of the lucky people who lives in a house that's in the area with contamination, but it's below 10 parts per trillion. So my question, I've been trying to get my water retested for about a year and a half. It was tested 2 years ago, and unless I go out and pay for it myself, I can't get it retested. So my question, you talked about areas that will show higher PFAS contamination in the future may be included in some of this stuff. So how do I get into the area where I can get my water tested and find out if my plume is going up or if it's going down, or how do I get it monitored in the future? Because when you start serving all these new people, you're going to be pumping a lot more water in the Plainfield water system, and it's going to be pulling the water through my property towards Grand River faster than it is now. And so it's going to be moving the plume, and I don't know if it's going to be pulling the plume away from me or pulling the plume into me.
Well, right now, we only draw water from the south side of the Grand River, so we shouldn't be having an effect on the north side of the river.
But you are. The water table's going down on the north side of the river, too.
Are you in the municipal water area?
No, I'm not.
Are you in the filter area?
No, I'm not.
So you're not in-
I'm
you're
below
not-
10 parts.
Well, you still have to look to see, there are a lot of homes that are non-detect that are in the municipal water or the filter areas, but,
Our home is not in the area that's
Okay.
going to get any kind of relief at all.
okay, so you're not in any of the zone within the black here?
That's
You're
correct.
outside of the black?
Well, I can't see what the
Yeah.
map from here, but we're on Childsdale and 7,000 block, and we have several homes in there that are contaminated, and we're not getting anything.
Yeah,
But the point is, under the environmental regulations as they exist right now, any other environmental site, I'm an environmental engineer, I've done this for many, many years. We can't just go out and take one sample and say, that's what the deal is. You always have to do multiple sampling.
Sure.
You have to determine where the plumes are, where they're going to, and whether the contamination levels are going up or down, and none of that seems to have been done, because we can't get any information from DEQ about what is happening in our neighborhood. And so I would like to find out how I can get retested and how I can get noticed from DEQ or Wolverine or whoever's going to be doing this, so that I can find out what's going on with my property. And it's my hope, and maybe you can answer this for me, is if it is on the rise and it does go above 10, am I going to be included in one of these areas that are going to be remedied?
Yeah, so again, DEQ, or Eagle, as you know, has primary jurisdiction over this question. They have studied the North Kent area, and they're pretty certain that we have this area covered as it should be. They're studying, as the gentleman wanted to know about Boulder Creek, they're studying that right now. I assume that part of the groundwater monitoring plant will include your area, because you're then on the east, you're east of this line then somewhere, right, on Childsdale?
I'm east of the river, yes,
You're east of the Rogue.
yes.
Okay, so that's being currently studied right now as part of the Boulder Creek study area. And, they have not landed yet on what their remedy is going to be for that particular area. The good news is there are more responsible parties for the contamination on that side. The bad news is there are more responsible parties on that side, and so Wolverine probably isn't going to accept immediately full responsibility. That is something that Eagle will primarily have to address with Wolverine as we go forward with that particular development. Again, I would urge you to go to the Attorney General's forum next Monday night, because those are legitimate questions for you to ask of the state team that is investigating East area problems. And all I can say is our consent decree deals with this area here, and it leaves open that question for Wolverine and others. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
ask a question on the back of that. Because this little area of Childsdale that we live in, we have the water main all around us. It's such a small section. My question is, why can't they bring us water? Because what you're listening to you're talking about these areas north and rural and far away and being developed now. This is an old section, it's been there a long time. I feel like we're going to be overlooked for those areas that are now being developed and are further north, further out. It's just a small section that we need a water main.
Yeah. Let me just say that your problem highlights one of the reasons we're mandatorily hooking up everyone in the municipal water area. Because frankly, let's be honest here, one of the differences between Grand Rapids and Plainfield Township has been just because they're putting water in, historically the township didn't force you to hook up. They left it to your discretion. Urban areas wouldn't do that. You're near, you're hooking up, your expense, get on with it. And we don't want to do that in these water areas that we're addressing, because that's exactly what can happen. Then later on, there's a problem, and now, we have different people at Wolverine, we have different people with the state, and we have a problem. So we're trying to learn from the mistakes of the past, and a mistake is too strong a word, because that's the way most people in your area want to live. They don't like being forced to hook up. But the reality is, one of the problems, if you don't do that, is when a problem develops, you're nearby municipal water, and in any other community, you would have been forced to hook up, but you're not hooked up yet, and you feel like you're being left out. So we'll take a look at that. We'll see, we'll keep that in mind as the state evolves with their study, because they haven't finished with their hydrogeology and their geological examination of that area. But hopefully, again, this is a model for how we can bring future relief to those areas.
I just want to say one thing.
Sure.
On what you just said. I just want to be clear that area of Childsdale we were never offered water. It's the subdivisions grew up around us and water was brought to all those subdivisions, but never offered this one.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you.
Yeah.
With the hookups and that, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, Ian Purvis. There was a map that you had earlier which showed I think you called it the affected area for Algoma. Is there an equivalent one for the Rockford area?
Well, here's Plainfield. Now you're asking for,
Okay, Plainfield.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
I'm sorry.
misspoke. I meant Plainfield.
you had it there a minute, Robert, the other one. This just skews it down a little further. So this is Plainfield's affected area. You can see that.
So why is the area east of the river, east of Packer Drive,
Right here?
why is that not part of the affected area?
Well, because, this really gets back to the last couple's questions. That hasn't been thoroughly studied by the DEQ. And you have to give the state, I guess, some slack here, because when this crisis developed, they knew about hydrogeology. They knew that House Street, that the rogue was likely to be a barrier for the House Street contamination.
Well, excuse me interrupting, but it's proven not to be, hasn't it?
Well, as they've studied it, we have seen and that's why some of the east of the river was included in this particular relief, okay? But when they first studied this, their focus was west of the rogue.
No, I understand the
And
history.
but now that this has evolved, they've expanded their study areas to include the areas east.
Okay,
So we
fair
haven't
enough.
gotten to the point, sir, yet. Just let me finish. I know where you're going.
Okay.
This has not been adequately studied, And Wolverine has not been identified as the responsible party for the contamination over here. It may be they are. It may be that it's coming from Boulder Creek and that dump and being drawn to the river this way. It may be. That will be determined, and then some sort of game plan will be developed by the state as to who's responsible for addressing concerns that pop up in that area, including this couple's concerns and potentially yours.
All right, I won't fight you on that. Can you
Well,
help me out? No, I have a follow-up question. Can you help me understand
Sure.
the area that was shown on the map as a designated area in red, east of the Rogue River, just north of the Grand River, that appears to be the golf course?
Yeah, so
So what's the significance of the golf course?
well, the golf course is going to, Blythefield's going to be hooked up. They have a municipal water line that runs up, I think it runs up Northland Drive there. Currently, they don't have it, but their clubhouse is going to be hooked up, right? We
But
don't
the
know
area
whether they...
immediately north of them is not in the affected area, but they are.
This area here, the state included in their study area early on. They decided there were some real significant hits in the along West River there, and
A lot of the area north too is already connected to municipal water, so they didn't study that area as intensively.
Right.
Early on, because there is municipal water in much of the Blythefield neighborhood, even though there are pockets that were not connected, as you were referring to earlier.
Okay. So Cameron has reminded me, and I know enough about the area to know that north of Blythefield, you have subdivisions that have municipal water. So as this crisis was being studied, Eagle broadened this area to include that as part of the North Kent study area. And I'll bet if you ask Wolverine, they're not sure that they're 100% responsible for Blythefield's problem. Or if they are, they probably would argue it's coming from Boulder Creek, and there are other responsible parties that should share the burden, that it's not coming from House Street. That was one of the reasons
sure
we
you're
settled.
right.
Yeah, I mean, they would make that argument. At least they've accepted responsibility for this part. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Don Anderson. I live on Childsdale.
Uh-huh.
There was a PFOX dump right behind our house, an old gravel pit. We would see when I was building the house, we would see Wolverine come in and dump. I walked back there one time with a small child, talked to the driver, asked him, what are you doing? He says, well, don't let your son play around this stuff. It was a dark bluish liquid type thing. It's bad for them. It's bad for their health.
Yeah.
So I talked to the guy that owned the property, Bob Steed. He said, I know how to stop it. So he said, you blocked the road. I blocked the road. And he called somebody, and the trucks started dumping down at the golf course.
Sure.
The same trucks.
And-
Okay, now I talked to the township, and the township said, well, you should be getting water. This was a couple years ago. And we're not on that particular map. Is that map accurate, or are we going to get water, or aren't we? We've got water mains probably 100 yards from our house.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. If you're not on the parcel list, as part of this settlement, you're not getting water yet.
Okay, but the
However-
township told me that we would be.
Yeah, I don't know. All I can say is, and I hope the DEQ knows about your historical dumping story.
Yeah,
and
right,
just-
they do, and they said that our property should be tested from time to time.
Yeah.
How do we go about getting that done, and is that going to cost us?
Right. So back to this couple's point, and this gentleman with the great accent, his point, you're in the next study area, and I'll make sure the DEQ knows about your link of your particular area to Wolverine, So they know as they're studying what to do about the Boulder Creek, you're likely to be part of that study report, and there'll be some strategy for how to deal with those properties in your situation. One thing you have to keep in mind, I told you about litigation is hurry up and compromise, hurry up and wait and compromise. Rather than resolving the Boulder Creek issue and the House Street in Wellington and wait for everything to be done, we are moving forward in the North Kent study area and trying to get a result as fast as possible so that we can attend to, many residents' concerns. Unfortunately, what that means is we have people in the Boulder Creek area or in the Childsdale area that are still left out of a resolution. This isn't the end, okay? I hesitate to say it's the beginning. I hope we're well 3/4 of the way through this controversy, but we're moving forward. Your areas will be studied, and hopefully the state will develop a plan working with the townships. Whether we have to get involved as townships again to make sure that your interests are protected, we'll have to wait and see. The state originally resisted my involvement and the township's involvement in the litigation. They like to handle this all by themselves, as you may know. We got involved so that your concerns could be raised in advance, and we'll continue to do that for you, even if you're not part of this particular settlement. So I have to work with the DEQ and its processes, but we are also independently getting involved to make sure they do the right thing in particular resident situations. We'll continue to do that for you.
Okay, you're a good attorney because you go around.
Yeah. And I talk a lot, as you're finding out. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Gerhart, and I had a couple of questions. I
Sure.
personally live in Algoma Township. I'm also a realtor in the area, and I have clients who are concerned for a couple of reasons. They want to sell. They've wanted to sell. They're now getting ready to, and so they have some questions about the timelines of everything coming through. And that map you gave was fantastic. Is there a way we can get a copy of that map?
Yeah, all of these maps are in the consent decree, and I have in my notes here, which is hard for me to read, the particular exhibit level, exhibit numbers that you should be looking for, and we'll make sure that information is out. This is the only map that isn't really in the consent decree. It's our
Right.
construction schedule tentative map, but those other maps are all part of the consent judgment.
I found the other maps. This is the one I'd like to see. Is there a way we can get a copy of this map? Is that a way that can become public? I got it. Kevin's going to get it.
Yeah.
All right. So my next question is, you mentioned Blythefield area earlier, and that there was already going to be there's already municipal water in there. However, not all of the homes that are in Blythefield acres are hooked up. Are they going to be able to be hooked up as part of this, or are they still on their own?
Again, right now, that's part of this same dialogue we were having. That, I assume, will be addressed when the second phase of the state study of this area is complete. Right now, we just have a game plan, and we have a defendant that's paying for this on this side. We don't have all of those questions resolved yet. So, this is, like I said, I think we're 75-80% of the way through, but we'll have to clean those issues up as things unfold with Wolverine and other parties who are maybe responsible for that pollution.
All right, and then finally, you mentioned about the fact that Wolverine will be paying for even the plumbing to be taken care of inside of the home, because I understand there has to be certain types of piping. Is that correct?
Yes, this is designed to be a turnkey operation for you so that homeowners who are benefited should not have to pay anything.
Also, in terms of their landscaping and being torn up, and that was not mentioned, I know it seems minimal in terms of everything, but if they want to sell their house, they want to know how quickly it's going to look nice to sell their house.
Right. Again, we did talk briefly about that. If your lawns are being interrupted with the service
Or
lines.
drain fields.
Pardon me?
And we're watching drain fields.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of these are all going to be septic tanks as well.
There's a budget for all of that restoration. The game plan is to restore the property to the, as much as possible to the way it looked beforehand.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Hi, Helen Pfizer. I reside at 6468 Livingood Street, Spring Valley Mobile Home Park. If I'm understanding correctly, most of this tonight isn't going to solve our problems. It's going to be a part of the Boulder Creek.
Yeah, you're on the other
issue.
side of Boulder Creek.
Yes. Spring Valley, when we went to the meeting at the Township, we were the newly identified contaminated area, which the other party you talk about did some pumping of water, and that's how we got contaminated. The issues being that when we deal with Eagle, we're in phase 1 of 6 parts of investigation on that. We're sitting here living with PFAS water, bathing in PFAS water. We are not getting bottled water. We are not getting house filters. We're not getting anything. So is this going to be something that's not going to be able to move forward unless somebody decides to jumpstart it with a litigation?
Yeah, I mean, I will find out, because I have a good relationship with the AGs who are assigned to this case, what they're going to do for people like you.
Because we're sitting right now with sick people in, the Spring Valley Mobile Home Park. You have 68 sites there. All of the people that are here tonight that are still sitting here saying, what are we going to do? I understand you're even guarded to bring the other party's name into it because it's not part of this litigation. There's not going to be a way for the state to not include the township as we get into the golf course Boulder Creek issue because somebody somewhere allowed permits for pipes and pumping and everything that went on. So we have damage from multiple parties.
Right.
And at some point, we are going to have to start getting answers of what we're going to do as far as bottled water, house filters. Tried talking with Eagle. They haven't gotten back with us yet. The mobile home park, easy. We're served by 2 wells.
Right.
If they would come in and put 2 filters on the wells, you'd have 68 people that are safe.
Yeah.
But they're still wanting to do their investigation, and we're in phase 1 of 6.
Right.
That gives you a little bit of hesitancy of sitting there and saying, okay, when does our turn come?
Yeah. And all I can tell you tonight is that one of the advantages of getting this behind us and getting that study area out of the way is it's going to free DEQ, candidly, to focus more on your problems.
This is a jump start.
It's a jump start. And, I don't want to sound like a Wolverine apologist here, but you have to give the company credit for at least jumping in and providing water and filter, bottled water and whole house filters to people like you. Now, they're not doing that because they think that's Boulder Creek Golf Course's problem and not theirs, and they have this big $100 million bill to take care of. At some point, they have to stop. And so, I give Wolverine some credit that for people like you, they stepped up, and you don't have that ready party that's stepping up and resolving your problem. This settlement will allow all of us to start focusing on you. Okay? And that's the best I can offer you tonight. And we're there as a township to make sure that Eagle does do that, and now in short order can start to attend to what makes sense practically, whether it's hooking you up to municipal water or getting, like you said, only 2 whole house filters would do it for fairly large, that's a good return on your investment. Maybe the state needs to take some of the new PFAS money that they've appropriated. So it's a good thing to ask Attorney General Nessel.
Absolutely. The letter's in.
Next Monday, because they do have funding now where they can, seek to provide you a remedy and then sue someone else to get
I'm
the...
also the coordinator of the Spring Valley Citizens Association, and our letter is in to the Attorney General.
Okay.
So we just got an email that they do have money appropriated, so we'll
Good.
be looking into a chunk of it.
And if you need help from us to push them along, please let us know.
Plan on it.
Okay. All right.
you.
Yep.
Now, how did you pick and choose who you were going to take care of first?
We didn't do that. Again, Eagle controlled the environmental response that they demanded of Wolverine. So all of that was done by Eagle or DEQ and Wolverine.
Okay, and how long is the next phase? Another 5 years before you start in?
I can't answer that, ma'am. I mean, that is a good question for Attorney General Nessel. I know they're working on that area. So they've been multitasking. There are studies that are ongoing with the Boulder Creek area or the areas outside of the affected area here. And you'll have to ask them because they're primarily tasked with the authority, frankly, and the responsibility to study those areas and then come up with a remedy.
And you also stated that when the water came down Childsdale, everybody could have connected, but nobody was asked to connect.
Yeah.
So why would you now blame the people?
I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying there's a different philosophy, that existed, that in Grand Rapids you would be forced to hook up. And we are now applying a little bit more of that philosophy, and most people don't like it, to be honest with you.
No, because you kind of
Yeah.
picked and chose who you wanted, and you
Well-
left the other ones out to dry.
Yeah, no, I can say that the new philosophy is when the water lines go through, people are going to be more likely to be forced to hook up now than they were in the past.
Okay.
All right? Hi.
My name is Renee. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
We have the whole house filtration system. We're on Harrington. So we always come in at very low numbers, 2, 3, what have you. Although right around the corner, they're at 10,000 parts per trillion. So my question is, we would prefer not to have to cap our well and still use it for irrigation only. If they do allow that, based on us keeping the filter system, do you have any idea what that costs to maintain over a year's time?
I don't know, and Wolverine will not be required to do that.
Correct.
And, it's probably a good idea that the DEQ isn't here tonight because they're hearing people like the last resident who's upset that there wasn't forced hookup. And they would say, we're not going to keep these wells going. Everyone's going to hook up and then we don't have to worry about concerns like this. Someone, maybe a buyer of your home, upset because your well wasn't capped and, you weren't forced to be hooked into the system. So I don't know what they'll say.
Yeah.
We'll have to sort that
We will
out.
hook into the system.
Yeah, I get it.
Just
You would
the
like to use
irrigation.
for irrigation.
Correct.
And
Correct.
I would say that, to be honest with you, unless you use the whole house filter, there's no way they're going to allow someone in Harrington to put unfiltered water on their lawns. You're too close to the center of the problem.
I know, we're at.
You're in ground
the initial
zero.
Ground zero, exactly. So if we hooked up, capped our well,
Yeah.
and we want to get rid of the filter system, whose
They will
responsibility is
take,
that?
they will take the filter out.
Okay,
Again, no cost to you. So
Okay.
the idea would be, the norm here is going to be, you'll be at full hookup and the removal and your well plugged at no cost. That's covered.
okay,
So the default is that, and it's cost-free for you, other than you'll have to be a normal resident of an urban water system.
okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I was just looking for clarification on the purple map, if we could take a look at
Sure.
that. I'm up on 11 Mile east of Algoma with water being hooked up on the east and west of us, but it looks like we are on that map. And I guess I was just looking for clarification, is that mandatory filter hookup, or
No.
we have to test our water periodically and then just report back to them if that comes back higher?
I think they'll be testing periodically, and if you hit 10, you'll get the filter.
Okay, and then,
If you're below that, they're not obligated to provide a filter, and you're not obligated to use the filter. I suspect that if you're like at 8, maybe Wolverine will say it's getting too expensive to test and might as well hook you up and be done, at least get you part of the filtering program. There may be dialogue like that when you get to that point. And obviously, if the threshold goes lower, then they'll be obligated if it goes down to 5, and you're at 6, they'll be obligated to hook you up with a filter, and then you'll be part of that trust fund.
I live on Imperial Pine off of House Street,
Okay?
and of course, we're right in the middle of
Your
it.
ground zero is what we just
Right.
called it.
Now, what they've done is, being that I'm on the private road, they've been up and down there and they have tore up all the blacktop that we as homeowners had to buy when we bought the doggone lots. The original man would not pay for the blacktop. Now I'm driving in mud. Are they going to eventually give me blacktop back, or am I going to drive in mud for the next 5 years?
It's a good question. And by the way, no one's asked this question, but your question brings this to mind. What's the impact? I don't know if you're sued Wolverine or not. Have you sued Wolverine?
No, I have not.
All right. Well, you might be part of a class action.
Well, I'm sure I am.
Yeah, you
in that
probably
regard,
are. And
yes.
those cases will continue. Now, obviously, they're affected by what we're doing here. Let's not be, unmindful that one of the reasons Wolverine is settling now is the first of those cases is coming up in March, and their ability to say, we've taken care of the water component of the property claims that are being made will help them. The particular property issues that some of you have, including you, sir, should be frankly addressed in those private suits because they're so particular. And so you may want to contact some of the class action plaintiffs' lawyers. They're looking for damages because they want a piece of the damage remedy they can give you. But those private suits are not released by this settlement. This will help Wolverine with the property damage and those claims that I can't sell my house because of the cloud. The cloud is largely being removed from the stigma from the property, so it'll help them there. But those cases are still continuing, and those private, rights should be pursued that way.
Okay, see, the power company came down and put the power down House Street, but they wouldn't come up my private drive. And now I'd like to know the water's going to come up there.
I assume you're in the municipal water area. You're going to get water.
Yes, I assume
And your ground zero is the first place we're going, they're sure.
Right, I got that from the message, but.
Yeah.
See, now my next question is when they put the water in and tear up my road again.
Well, there is a budget for fixing whatever they tear up.
Okay, that
So we
answers
will
my
fix
question.
whatever we tear up.
Okay.
I can't say that we're necessarily fixing everything Wolverine tore up, but we will fix what we tear up in this process, okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm in the yellow area, so we're dead last.
Yeah, okay.
And I was wondering if you could elaborate on if there's a depletion of funds. Because I have experience with construction and I know about budget
Well,
overruns.
We've committed, so one of the decisions we made, and it was part of the negotiations, do we let Wolverine just do all this? And we decided we didn't trust the engineering necessarily, the quality of the contractors we might get. So we didn't want to turn this project over to Wolverine. On the flip side, Wolverine is saying, well, okay, then we're going to they want to micromanage how we're doing. We didn't really want the micromanagement either. So where we ended up is we've got the $62 million, and we're taking the commitment as the township to provide the water in that area. So you're going to get it. And if we'll have to figure out a way of financing it if we don't have enough money. We believe we have enough money. We've got some contingencies built into that $62 million, but you're right. That's a risk we're taking in order to take control of this. It's a risk we're taking as part of the compromise. You know, Wolverine, you can understand that. They're putting $100 million, they want a cap. They want to know what this is going to cost them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get that. So
I do too,
we're
but it just
taking that
makes
community risk. We are taking that community risk as part of this settlement, but we cannot not provide you municipal water.
Okay. Because just when you say the township is going to find a way,
Yeah,
yeah, that makes me leery.
Yeah.
That there's not anything cut and dried.
yeah,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
My name is Diane Penland, and I live on Algoma Woods Drive, and we are one of the houses that have the open-loop geothermal system.
Okay.
And everybody on our entire street has that open-loop geothermal system.
Are you open loop or closed loop?
We are definitely open-loop.
Okay.
We have a big tube that dumps it out constantly.
Yeah, yeah.
We've been told that it can draw up to 21,000 gallons a day. If you do the math, that's just shy of $2 million every quarter. I've done the math. That means we were told we would have to cap off our well and couldn't use it anymore because even if we don't have PFAS now, we could in the future, and they don't want that dumped in our property. So if you do the math, that would make our bill for our municipal bill, our water bill, $6,800 a quarter.
Yeah. So,
And we don't have a,
yeah.
there's no gas hooked up to our house, so in essence, our heat would be cut off and we'd have no way to heat our home. And I wonder if that's being addressed by any of this.
Yeah, so, you know, when you were told a flat no, we asked Eagle to investigate that further. There's been some movement on their part. We now have a process whereby we can look at permitting that. I think are you at non-detect right now or low detect?
We are, but our neighbors right across the
Yeah.
street has PFAS in their water.
Yeah.
And it's being dumped in their yard right now, which
Yeah.
is right across the street from us.
Yeah, now, do they have whole house filters or not?
I believe they do.
Yeah. So, you know, again, I think what we're going to have to look at is if you're right now not showing any PFAS in your water, then they may put the burden on you to have that annually tested. But if you continue to have no PFAS in your water, then you'll have a pretty good argument for continuing to use that well. And we'll have to see how that goes. For your neighbor, we've talked tonight, you know, even a little bit about the possibility maybe they can continue to use, if they want to maintain it, their whole house filter, if it enables their heating system. We're just going to have to look at those things individually and work with Eagle. They have a team that's studying it. They're aware of the problem. And, you know, I started by saying that I had a low opinion of DEQ and Eagle because I've been on the other side most of my career when this started. And, you know, I've been impressed that generally their hearts have been in the right place here. They've been very practical in dealing with this. So let's hope that continues and we can work with them through that ordinance process. And we can come up with practical solutions for you that don't, especially if they're not compromising the environment. And if you're just putting clean water on there, you know, I think there'll be sympathy for your economic issue.
All right.
Okay?
I heard you say earlier that Wolverine was self-funding
Yeah.
the work, the 100 million, or
The
millions of dollars?
69.5 million. Yeah.
And I also heard you say that they couldn't bond. Did I hear that right?
No, we could bond, and they wanted the municipal bonding, okay? And Kent County was willing to use its AAA bonding and spread this out 20 or 30 years, and that's very attractive to Wolverine. The problem was, how do we get security? You know, Wolverine has the cash right now. Wolverine is a very profitable company. In the next 4 years, I don't think anyone expects them not to be able to afford this settlement. But what happens 25 years from now?
So how are they funding in perpetuity for all the whole house filters and all of that? I don't think you talked about that.
To close the loop on the self-funding, where we ended up, it became so difficult for them to establish the security to take care of Kent County's bond council that it drove them back to, let's just pay the cash up front in 4 years and be done with it. And so on that side of it, there's a cash commitment. Judge Neff is going to order them to pay, so they'll be ordered to pay. And in the near term, we can be pretty well assured that they will, on pain of contempt, fund the $69.5 million. The state then, and this took the negotiations over the weekend, frankly, wants money in this trust fund up front. And what that trust fund is, I'm not privy to that. That's, you know, what the state and Wolverine have settled on, but a trust fund has been negotiated to take care of that. And they'll have to fund that up front so that we can rest assured that if they go bankrupt, we're still protected.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? If not, yes, ma'am.
So I have the luxury of having not very serious questions. I receive Plainfield water, so I'm not in the troubled districts. But some of the questions, these questions came up tonight, like what office in Plainfield Township receives the well water data 24/7? What office receives that? How will we be able to access that or find out about it?
Well, all of the water plant testing data is put online, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Quite all of it, but we do
Regularly,
Yeah.
it's put on
Okay.
line. We want to be transparent about
True.
that system.
Mhm.
You have FOIA, you know, as an opportunity as well. So,
Okay.
you know, that's one of the benefits of having the public in charge
Mhm.
of this process, is you have events like this, you have township board meetings to come to, and you have an open meetings so that, you know, there is transparency.
Okay. Is there anything in this consent decree that deals directly with the Rogue River, with what they're doing on the Rogue River to clean that and to
Yes.
test it for its effect on creatures and plant life?
Yes.
There
And
is?
there's, that's one of the reasons it's that thick.
Yes.
And it just addresses plans. There's aquatic plants, there's all kinds of plans that they have to come up with that will deal on the environmental side of this resolution. So rest assured, they have taken care of that. And, you know, I earlier suggested that they didn't compromise the way they approach this. There are costs, there are damages that they're paying for to the Rogue River from, you know, some of the hides and the things in the tannery site. So that took a long time for them to negotiate all of that. Those are provisions that you'll see in the consent decree, at least in broad terms.
So that $100 million, some of that $100 million
No.
is focused on that? That's separate?
That's separate.
Thank
So
you.
on top of the
Thank
100
you.
million, they are also doing cleanup at the tannery, House Street site, and the aquatic damages.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Kind of a personal thing, did you personally work with Attorney Feinberg from New York City? I used to read about him and see him after 9/11 and wondered if you were...
Yeah, we had him as our facilitative mediator, Ken Feinberg.
Mhm.
Yeah, they call him the master of disaster.
Yes.
Yeah, and
used to
he's
see him
doing
a
the
lot.
Boeing Max, he's doing the Roundup, he's doing a lot of the church,
Good.
you know, Catholic Church scandals. So
Mhm.
he was instrumental in getting the ball rolling.
Yes.
And then we took it from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Last but not least, no, there's two. Two more things. What was that issue you mentioned with waste management?
So we have, the state waste management owns the closed state landfill on the East Belt Line.
Okay.
If you go, you know, south on the East Belt Line, you'll see on the left, you know, past, was it 5 mile, 4 mile? Between 4 and 5 miles? Yeah. You will see, you know, the vents from the old land. That landfill, again, the river's a magnet, so the contamination coming out of that unlined landfill, that historical landfill,
Mhm.
which got some of Wolverine's waste,
Yes.
is moving north. Everything from House Street's moving south,
Mhm.
but because the Grand River is drawing it, it's drawing it from the south up. And that's bringing some of that contamination into our wells. And so Waste Management has a responsibility to us
Yes.
for some of the costs that we're incurring on our plant. And that'll be my next project.
Good. Good luck with that.
There's no rest for the wicked here.
Yes. And last, I thought I don't think I dreamt this. I thought I read something about they're detecting that PFAS is also is able to be spread through the air. Is that correct?
Yeah,
or-
it's ubiquitous. I mean, it's everywhere. And if you've seen, you know, we're not alone. Washington, D.C. is over 10 parts per trillion in their system. Louisville. Anything that draws river water is likely to be, you know, contaminated. So, yeah, it's all over. Like Michigan, you know, has it 2 parts to 10 parts per trillion, depending on where it is, and it is in the air. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome. Oh, you're just sitting down, that's okay. Okay, good for you. Well, you may do that. Yeah,
Quickly.
Sure.
Was it considered for us that are at ground zero, as you call it,
yeah.
to be grandfathered in from not receiving a bill? If I'm forced to hook up to your system, why aren't we grandfathered in from not receiving a bill? With all this money that's flying around, why wasn't that considered?
Well, again, in our situation, we negotiated with Wolverine, knowing
not on
those.
my part, though, you
I understand. I don't know if you have your own lawsuit against them. Do you have your own lawsuit?
do, yeah.
Okay, well then, you may continue. That is a damage claim. You can continue. We've released none of your claims, sir. So feel free to take that up with your lawyers and say, I wouldn't have that bill before. I deserve to receive the benefit of that in your ongoing litigation with Wolverine, okay?
Good advice. Did you guys consider that, though? Just
Oh, we considered it, and there's no way they were going to voluntarily provide
Sure,
that.
I
And,
understand
you know, part of their rationale is we can't control your usage. We may have some people, or we're hooking people up that may have non-detect. We're not going to pay for their thousands of gallons that they're using on their geothermal open loop system. So this was a compromise, and we, you know, Mr. Feinberg has complimented us on the amount that we were able to negotiate from Wolverine. So he would tell you this is a great deal, considering what we left open, considering we didn't force you to release your claims. Those are best picked up individually in your circumstances with your law firm in your lawsuit.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. So if there are no additional questions, then we're going to open it up for comment. If you've got something to say that you haven't had an opportunity to say about this, feel free to take the mic and let us know how you feel. Again, part of the reason, we're a public entity. We expect transparency, and we, open this up for your comments. If not, I want to thank you for coming here, expressing your interest. We'll continue, for those of you who don't have a solution yet, we'll continue, to be there as a public governmental source interested in your issues to try to push Eagle and whatever responsible party we can find. Anything else, Cameron? Did we cover it all? Thank you very much.